Thank you, Jadavji, for your nice introduction. Let me first tell you that I'm not going to present my talk through a PPT. This is due to the fact that I have been trained in mathematics, and as I am a mathematics teacher, usually students they feel that class goes very interactive when I teach through chalk and talk, and therefore I started my career with chalk and talk, and I hope I will finish my career also with chalk and talk, because that gives maximum takeaway to the students. And as this is a faculty development program, or you can also think of a short-term course, although it is a course on control theory, but associated to the control theory, always optimization plays a role behind. And there is eventually a broad topic on control theory that is called optimal control. Although I will not be talking here any of the control theory, but I will just go through several topics on optimization. It is just like a detour on optimization and how optimization theories have been developed and all, so that it will be a bit of mathematics, more of stories kind of thing, how the things have been developed mathematically and how people have thought to develop such methods, such mathematics and so on. Anyway, so let me start with the very basic notion of optimality. Here in the entire lecture, I will be referring only a minimization problem because this is due to the fact that I will be talking about solving a minimization problem. I am endeavoring to find minimum of a function of several variables where X is restricted to lie on a constraint set, or maybe in some cases this constraint set is the entire n-dimensional Euclidean space. When C is equals to Rn, in that case we have the variable X unrestricted to lie in the entire n-dimensional space, and hence we refer it as an unconstrained optimization problem. However, when C is strictly a subset, a non-empty subset of the n-dimensional Euclidean space, then we will refer this problem as a constraint optimization problem. So let me at first consider here to tell why I am referring only minimization problem. This is due to the well-known fact that any maximization problem, if I have this problem that I am endeavoring to find maxima of the function fx subject to the constraint that x belonging to the constraint set C, then in that case you note that this is equivalent of this objective function fx, which we are trying to identify a maximum. For that we note that it is nothing but minimum of the function minus of fx, and therefore by redefining the objective function by gx, where gx is minus of fx, we note that this maximization problem is nothing but a minimization problem, and therefore there is no loss of generality if we discuss only a minimization problem. And that is the reason behind any optimization article, any optimization book, if you look at, you will find they start with local minimum, global minimum and so on. This is due to the very fact that they are not losing any generality, that any maximum problem can be posed as a minimum problem. So let us now try to talk about identifying minimum of a function of several variables. I have a function of several variables fx. Here x is having n many components, x1, x2 till xn. Fine. And for this function, I am trying to find a local minimum. For that, we have the following definition. As you all know, by a local minimum is the following definition. By a local minimum point x bar, we mean a point x bar such that there exists a neighborhood of the point x bar. Let me say this is my location of the point x bar, if there exists a neighborhood, by neighborhood of the point x bar we mean set of collection of points which are neighboring to the point x bar. So let me say this is my region of the neighborhood. Corresponding to this neighborhood, we note that we have a radius of amount delta. So there exists a neighborhood of the point x bar such that in this neighborhood, whatever point you pick up, let's suppose I take a generic element fx. If I see that my function value at x bar is the minimum most for every x in the neighborhood n delta x bar, then we say the point x bar a local minimum. And if x bar is a local minimum, then we usually write x bar as the argument of the minimum of the function fx, and this is usually denoted by x bar is equal to argument minimum of fx. By that we mean a point, a variable point x bar at which the function fx gets a minimum value. This is a very simple definition of local minimum, but in the books on optimization, you will observe that immediately after the local minimum, they give a definition called strict local minimum. But you know, mathematics have been developed, with a very concrete reason behind. So if I am just going to define something, I must have something had in my mind. What is that I have had defining strict local minimum? So my question here is the following. Why do we need the concept of strict local minimum? Why do we need the concept of strict local minimum? I guess you all know what is the definition of strict local minimum. It is the same definition, but there you know that this inequality goes with strict inequality, that I say a point x bar a strict local minimum of the function fx if I have a neighborhood of the point x bar such that I am observing that fx is strictly greater than fx bar for all x's in the neighborhood n delta x bar. That is the simple definition of strict local minimum. But why do we need to introduce such a concept? What was the deficiency of the definition of local minimum? The reason is the following. You know that by the definition of local minimum, we can have a possibility that a local minimum can be a global maximum. For instance, let me draw a hypothetical graph. You all can find an expression for this function very nicely. Let me consider this function. Let me say this is my variable axis x and this is my function value axis y. And let me consider a graph of this kind. I have, let's suppose, this function that let's suppose this point is my -1. So graph is straight line on the left hand side of 1, this straight line, and then the function value is constant in between 1 to, let's suppose, 5. And after 5, I have a linear function, and linear function goes down till -infinity. Now for this function, we note that any point in between 1 to 5, I pick up any point x belonging to 1 to 5. We note that any point in between this open interval 1 to 5, this definition is followed, that fx greater than equals to fx bar, because you have the equality fx is equal to fx bar. Any x bar you pick up, I take any point x bar in between 1 to 5, I have this fact that fx is equal to fx bar in some neighborhood. Let me say I have this point x bar, and then you have at least a small neighborhood such that in this neighborhood you pick up any point x and you get the same value as that of fx bar, and therefore this satisfies the definition of local minimum, and hence any point in this interval 1 to 5 open interval, the function gets a local minimum. And most surprisingly, any point in between open 1 to 5 is also a global minimum. So by this definition of local minimum, we have an anomaly that a local minimum can be a global maximum, which we do not usually expect. A local minimum can possibly be global maximum. Fine. And but we do not expect this, that a local minimum will become a global maximum. That we do not expect. What we usually expect that we consider set of all local minimum. Let's suppose I have these points. Let's suppose I have x1, x2, and let's suppose xp. I have this p many local minimum of a function. Let's suppose I draw a function here. Let's suppose my graph is this kind, and here is my x-axis, and I have the local minimums here. Here is the point x1, here is the point x2, here is the location of x3. Then I have a local minimum here. Let's see xp. Fine. So I note that here, corresponding to the graph of y equals to fx that I drew over here, for this function we note that I have several local minimum. Those are x1, x2, x3 till xp. And if I take minimum most value of the local minimas, that means if I take minimum of f of x1 till f of xp, then we usually expect that we will get the global minimum of the function. This is what we usually expect, that global minimum. However, here by the definition of local minimum, we note that we can have a possibility of local minimum being a global maximum. In order to resolve this anomaly in the definition of local minimum, usually we define the concept of strict local minimum, and once we go with this definition of strict local minimum, we note that we will not have any case such as this local minimum is a global maximum. And this local minimum is global maximum is coming out due to the fact that here you have included the equality sign as well. But if we just remove the equality sign in the definition of local minimum, then we will not have the possibility of local minimum becoming a global maximum. But here I have said another thing. In the discussion of local minimum, why do we need the concept of strict local minimum? I have gone through another concept. It is the following, that I was mentioning this fact that I considered to identify set of all local minimas, and I take minimum most of all the local minimas, and I expect that it will give us a local minimum, global minimum. Now, is it really true? My question is the following next, that my question, is it true that global minima of a function is the minimum most value of all local minimas? Is it true? Now here again, surprisingly, although from this figure that I have drawn, or usually we draw during a class on optimization or during a discussion in our high school level in the course of calculus, we usually, when we discuss to the students about local minimum, we usually draw this figure and we say there are many local minimum. You see, these are local minimum, and also you see these are local maximum, and so on. This is what usual graph that we draw in the high school level. We all have gone through with this graph. Now again, from there we usually think that you take minimum most value of all local minimum and you get a global minimum, but that is not always true. The answer for this question is again a negative one, that it is really a big no. Why? For this, I am giving this following counter example. I will just draw a hypothetical graph and you all can get a particular expression for this function. For instance, let me consider this function. I consider a function like this. On the left hand side, it is just straight line and it is going down to infinity, minus infinity. And I have, let's suppose, the graph of the function is this, and then again it is a straight line. Fine. And it moves to positive infinity. Now here for this function, we know that we have a local minimum here. We also have a local minimum here. Now I pick up the minimum most value of these two local minima and you get the global minima. As if you feel that global minima is the minimum most of all local minimum, then obviously this is the global minimum value. This much height, this much function value is your, this much function value is your global minimum value. But is it really true for this function? We know that it has local minima. This is a point local minima. This is also a point where you have a local minima. But you take minimum most of the local minimum, you are not getting the global minimum value, because obviously this is not the global minimum value, because global minimum value is minus infinity here. And therefore, although we usually think that global minimum is the minimum most value of all local minima, but that is not a true fact. Now with this, but here you might something deeper if I go, that you might think that if my function is let's suppose bounded below, that means my function is not moving down arbitrarily. That means the function value is always let's suppose my function value is always greater than some constant small m that we call as a lower bound of the function. If this is true, that means my function value is always bigger than this much level. Let's suppose my m is this much, small m, and let's suppose my function is such that I am not having minus infinity, but if I am bounding the function by this much line, line of this y is equal to m, my function value is less than this, and it is not below small m for all x belonging to the entire domain of the function f. Now in this scenario, can we have that global minimum is the minimum most value of all the local minima? Again, the answer is no. For instance, we consider a function as follows. Let me consider a function like this. Let me say I am considering a function like this. I have two local minimum, then x-axis is asymptotic. Fine. And for this graph, y is equals to fx. We know that it has local minimum. Here is a point local minimum. Here is also a point local minimum, but it does not have global minimum. You might think 0 is the value local, that is global minimum, but 0 is never attained by this function. The function value fx is always greater than 0, and therefore there does not exist any x such that fx is equal to 0, and therefore global minimum value does not exist at this scenario. So this is what the anomaly that we usually get, that global minimum is the minimum most value of the local minimum. It is not true. Anyway, so here before getting into much deeper analysis on optimization, let me speak a few words about the terminologies. Those are usual in optimization theory or operations research. Here again I spoke out two words, optimization and operations research. Usually this is a common thinking, at least in India, that at least by Indian students I have seen the following fact. When they take my course at IIT BHU, the course name is optimization techniques, but students, they usually refer this course by OR. When they come to my chamber and they just come and say, sir, I have few doubts on OR. I usually ask, what is OR? And then they will say, sir, it is your course that you are taking. I said, no, I don't take OR course. I take optimization techniques. And here I must say a few words about the terminologies. Operations research, which is popularly abbreviated by OR or operational research, operations research or operational research, and optimization. You also must have gone through several other nomenclatures. Those are non-linear programming, you also have gone through the terminology called linear programming problem. Linear programming problem. Another terminology is mathematical programming. These are few terminologies. Those are interchangeably, rather deliberately used by the Indian students. But here there are big difference between all these topics. All the topics that I have written down here. At first, I have written operations research. Operations research is not at all equivalent to the topic of optimization, nor optimization, neither nonlinear programming, neither linear programming, nor mathematical programming. Operations research is a separate topic which is just application of the optimization theory or the techniques of optimization in the real-time system. Usually in operations research usually go along with the flavor of management science or the economists. So wherever there is some kind of decision making problem, or management science flavor, or you have some economic flavor, and here is also management science, they usually mix up with decision science and statistics, and they come out with a topic called management science or in management science or something. Usually what happens, let me just speak a few words about the terminology operations research or operational research. As I said, let me be neat that operations research is not at all goes along with optimization theory or nonlinear programming. Operations research is not equivalent to optimization. OR should not be spoken as any of the topics nonlinear programming, linear programming, or mathematical programming. Operations research terminology is floated out eventually by non-mathematical background researchers who were not much mathematically involved, but they usually apply the techniques of linear programming, most popularly the simplex method or any nonlinear programming technique to solve their decision making problem. Those are coming out from management aspect, and as they were not mathematically involved in during the Second World War, this operations research terminology came out immediately after the innovation of linear programming or the simplex method by the mathematician Dantzig, George Dantzig, who is the father of linear programming problem and who is eventually the innovator of the simplex method, and it was developed during the Second World War. It was developed in the Second World War, and George Dantzig was a mathematics student. Just after his PhD, he was searching for a job, and it was during 1941. Who had just finished his PhD, and then he was searching for a job, and his PhD work was related to the geometry of the column space of a matrix, and later on it was evolved to be the simplex method later on. But George Dantzig was recruited by US Army, and he was given the following task, that he had a problem as follows. He had 70 persons and 70 assignments are to be made for these 70 people. So he had 70 tasks and 70 resource or manpower. 70 manpower he was having and 70 tasks he was having, and he had to find an effective allocation of each man to each task. The restriction was each man has to be assigned to a task and each task has to be assigned. So there are obviously 70 factorial assignments, but how big this allocation, how big this number is? 70 factorial. Obviously here not all 70 men are equally potential, and therefore corresponding to every man there was a cost allocated to every function. That is the efficiency. Let's suppose the man 1 has the efficiency 1, man 2 has efficiency 2, and so on. So every person is having different kind of efficiency, and their efficiency was numerically given some value. And now he was having this task, that 70 factorial tasks, 70 factorial assignment he was having, because he has 70 man and 70 space he was having. As you all know, 70 allocations, 70 empty space can be allocated by 70 choices in 70 factorial way, right? And 70 factorial, how many big quantity it is? It is 10 to the power 100 or so. 70 factorial is even bigger than 10 to the power 100, almost equal to 10 to the power 100. And you know, manually, if we try to assign, manually, if we try to check that 70 man, if I am assigning the first task to the first man, if I assign first task to the second man, if I assign first task to the third man, and so on. So in this way, 70 factorial tasks, if I am evaluating, and later on I am accumulating that which one is an effective allocation, and in that case, you know, how much time do we require? 10 to the power 100 is not a small quantity. In the Reminiscences of George Danzig, it was published in 1981, and it is a very nice article on reminiscences about the development of linear programming, and this is written by George Danzig, who has given a complete sketch about his development, and also he annotated the development of optimization theory, and it was published in Operations Research Letters journal in the volume number 1 to 2. Fine, a joint volume it was having, and the title of the paper was, I'm having this paper with me, this Reminiscences about, if any one of you are interested on optimization theory, they will feel it is interesting to read this article, Reminiscences about the origins of linear program. Very interesting to read this. If anyone is inclined towards optimization, they must have read this paper, and very nicely he has written several developments. Anyway, but there in this paper, you will just get a sense of how big 10 to the power 100 this number is, and how much time usually the IBM 168 was available during that time in 1981, and with this computer, how much time Danzig should have devoted to check all the assignments by IBM 168 computer. He was saying that if 10 to the power 44 hours are filled with such computers who can execute 10 billion calculations, 10 billion assignments per second, then they will need almost like 50 years to execute by computer all these 70 factorial assignments. And then he felt, well, this problem I cannot solve also. But later on, he was trying to model this problem, try to model this problem in terms of mathematics. In terms of mathematical language, he was trying to find what is essentially the problem over here. He found, very interestingly, is that this problem is nothing but a minimization of a linear function. Minimization of a linear function cu1 x1 plus c2 x2 plus till, let's suppose, n many variable we are having cn xn subject to linear constraints, m many linear constraints, that a11 x1 plus till a1n xn less than equals to some b1, and similarly let's suppose ai1 till in bi, and he was having m many inequalities. He has found this problem is nothing but a linear programming problem, in which he has to find minimum of a linear function subject to linear inequalities. Although this terminology linear program was not given by George Dantzig, but later on I'll come back how the terminology came. George Dantzig wrote his paper under the title Optimization in a Linear Structure, because it is an optimization problem where the objective function and constraints are given by linear functions. That's why George Dantzig named his article as Programming in a Linear Structure. Why the terminology programming? The terminology programming, those are here in nonlinear programming, in linear programming, or in mathematical programming. These terminologies are not associated with the computer coding or computer programming. This programming terminology came from the very fact that 70 man has to be assigned to 70 tasks. It was and this problem was coming out from a scheduling task, that which soldier will go for fighting at which particular location out of the 70 locations. So this was the task. So it was some kind of scheduling problem. He has to schedule effectively. 70 soldiers was there, 70 locations, particular locations was there. And therefore he was thinking it is a scheduling problem, and usually schedules in common languages, schedules are usually referred as program. Like let's suppose we have a night program, you have a program of several technical universities, and so those are all referred as schedule or programs. And that's why the same terminology programming, as it was given by George Dantzig, as his article was written as programming in a linear structure or scheduling in a linear structure, as the terminology programming was appended to the article written by George Dantzig, the programming terminology carried forwarded, and till today it is referred as linear programming. And this programming does not have any association with the computer programming or computer coding. Anyway, now who has given then the terminology linear programming? Who has given the terminology simplex? Usually George Dantzig has not given the terminology linear programming, nor he has given the terminology simplex method. Although simplex method, the method that he evolved to solve this problem, this linear programming problem or programming in a linear structure, that is in today's terminology simplex method, but it was not given by George Dantzig. This simplex method name was given by, but before simplex method, let me say you the linear programming. Linear programming terminology was given by his friend Koopman. George Dantzig was visiting to Rand Corporation. This Rand Corporation in USA is still there, which is a very popular corporation for computation. Efficient computations are done in this corporation. And in Rand Corporation, when Dantzig was invited in the Santa Monica Beach in Santa Monica Beach is very nearby to the Rand Corporation, and it was 1949 when Koopman and Danzig was taking a walk in the Santa Monica Beach. Koopman was Danzig's friend, and then Danzig was explaining during their walking that this is the method that I have discussed, I have recently published. And then Koopman jokingly asked, "What title have you given? Usually, I know for sure you give a very big name for this." Then he said, I gave the title as linear programming in a linear structure. Then Koopman said, "Why don't you name it as linear programming? Why don't you sort it as a linear programming?" Then Danzig accepted, and since then, after 1949, the terminology linear programming was given to the problems where you have to minimize a linear objective function subject to a linear constraint. So this linear programming name is given by the great mathematician Koopman. Eventually, he worked several nice classical problems on statistics. This Koopman. Koopman is a very big figure in statistics theory. Anyway, so this was linear programming, but this linear programming, you know, was not only published in this linear programming, it was published, although it was developed in 1945 or so, but it was published in 1947. And around this 1947, there was a symposium, a mathematical statistics symposium, and it was happened in the University of Berkeley. And there in the University of Berkeley, George Danzig was invited to discuss his paper. And after the discussion of George Danzig, who has discussed with a very clear assumptions, very clear axioms on the problem, what are the assumptions he clearly mentioned at first. Then he written his problem, and afterwards he nicely presented the entire methodology, the simplex method, in terms of geometry, so that every audience of the every people on the audience, they could get his point. And obviously this was again titled as programming in linear structure. After the discussion by George Danzig, there was a big whale man who stood up from the behind of the audience, and Hotelling was a big figure in statistics during that time, and it was Hotelling who has a very giant figure, and he just stood off at the rear bench, and then Hotelling requested to the chairman of the presentation that I have a question. Then obviously the chairman accepted. Then the question, it was not just a question, but was a comment given by Hotelling after the presentation of George Danzig, that we all know that the realistic problems are all non-linear. And then he majestically sat down, and Danzig was very young at that time. Just he finished his PhD, and Hotelling and several other optimizers like John von Neumann, several other statisticians, they were present there. And Danzig was little frightened by the comment of Hotelling, because Hotelling just not only commented, but it has hinted the following, and it is eventually suppressing comment. He mentioned to a young guy who presented to the audience a very big theory, but Hotelling just mentioned your problem is not useful, your presentation is not useful, because although it was not the sentence given by Hotelling just sentenced that we all know the realistic problems are so non-linear. And therefore it is obvious. Therefore he wanted to sit. Hoteling wanted to say that your discussion is of no use. And this is the fact in today's also. You go to any conference or so. If it is a very big conference, and you will find that usually the people who are little famous, they usually suppress to the young guys. And this was so the fact during that time also. And Hoteling's comment was suppressing to the Danzig, but Danzig was a little frightened, but he was he was just accumulating a few words to answer his question. But there was Koopman in the hall, and Koopman knew what Danzig presented, because before coming to the symposium, Danzig presented his paper to Koopman, not Koopman, Neumann, John von Neumann, N-U-M-A-N-N, John von Neumann, and Neumann requested to the chairman that if the speaker agreed, that means if Danzig agreed, then Neumann would like to answer the comment by Hotelling. Then obviously both chairman and the speaker, they obviously agreed, because Danzig was frightened. So obviously if somebody supports, obviously people will be happy. And this was the fact that Neumann supported to the Danzig, and Neumann said the following, that Mr. Chairman, you please note that Danzig presented his article with a very clear set of axioms. He has presented what are the axioms, what are the assumptions of the problem, very neatly he has presented. Under those assumptions, he has presented geometrically how the problem can be solved. And if your problem fits into the assumption or axioms by Danzig, then you apply the Danzig's method. And otherwise, if your problem does not fit into the axioms of Danzig, then nobody is forcing you to apply. So you apply if your problem is satisfying the axioms of Danzig, otherwise don't apply it. Who is forcing you to apply? But well, this was answer to the given by Neumann, and well, people accept it. Obvious it is. In mathematical presentation, you know, you should have a very clear-cut assumptions. Not every method can solve every problem, right? And for every mathematical problem, you should have some assumptions, and those are called as theorems. That under these assumptions, my conclusion is this: not every problem can be solved by only one theorem. Not every problems of mathematics can be solved by only one method. And not every optimization problem can be solved by the simplex method. That is very true. But if your problem is a linear programming problem, Danzig's method is a very efficient method. And Danzig method was efficient till 1971. Till 1971, there was no other technique than simplex method who could beat the simplex method's computational cost. Anyway, so these are a few things about the development of linear programming, and I must mention here a few words about nonlinear programming also. That well, Hoteling's comment, although it was suppressing, but his comment obviously we cannot neglect, because not every problem in optimization is a linear programming problem, and therefore people have to find techniques to solve nonlinear programming as well. And from his comment in 1947, people have started thinking about solution methodology for nonlinear programming problem. Nonlinear programming problem is just opposite to the linear programming, that if your problem is not linear programming problem, then it is a nonlinear programming problem. Or in more mathematical way, that if any of the objective function, the objective function or any of the constraint function gi here, if any of them, at least one of f or gis, if at least one of them is nonlinear, then we call it as a nonlinear programming problem. And as linear programming is little bit restrictive, that's why Dorfman, Dorfman, who is also a great optimizer, Dorfman has given the terminology as mathematical programming. Mathematical programming is just combination of nonlinear and linear programming, and mathematical programming terminology is a little bit modern, and where the terms like argument minimum, the term that I have used here, this argmin at the very beginning of the talk, argmin or lexicographic minimum or max mean or several ordering structure of the optimization, they are all taken into the terminology in mathematical programming. Or broadly, nonlinear programming and linear programming, if you just club them together, they are referred as mathematical programming. And mathematical programming is equivalent of optimization problem. Mathematical programming is equivalent of optimization. Optimization is a mathematical topic, and this is eventually evolved. This optimization, obviously optimization nomenclature is found in English dictionary. Nobody has given this terminology optimization. Optimization, this terminology eventually exists when the language English has started. So this optimization is eventually equivalent of the mathematical programming, and optimization came out by the interplay between calculus and geometry. Calculus and geometry, their interplay rose out the topics of optimization, and therefore to learn optimization one has to have a deeper understanding on calculus and as well as the coordinate geometry, and otherwise optimization theory will be not easy to learn if we are not able to visualize at least geometrically the theorems and result on optimization. And if you try to recollect the theories in terms of geometry, things will be really interesting in optimization theory to learn. Anyway, so these are few terminologies and all. And well, I must mention who has given the terminology, the simplex method. Simplex method was not given by Danzig, it was given by Mochkin, and Mochkin is a person who is known to be a person writing the thesis. His thesis was entitled by solving the problems of linear inequalities. So the thesis of Mochkin involved the theories for having solution of linear inequalities, that ax less than equals to b. When this system of inequalities, where a is a matrix of order m by n and x is the variable, n-dimensional variable, and b is a constant vector, m-dimensional vector. For this inequality, when one can have a solution, this was all about the thesis of Mochkin. And it was in 1939, and Mochkin's thesis included only 36 papers in 1939, and now you can think that how little was developed in optimization theory before the thesis of Mochkin. Mochkin, after reading the paper of Danzig, programming in a linear structure, Mochkin named his method as the simplex method, because the geometry of the simplex method is the following. Because Mochkin understood that Danzig's article is nothing but application of the geometry of the column space of the matrix A. A is the matrix given is coming out from the constraint here, these linear inequalities. If we accumulate the coefficients, you are getting a matrix of order m by n. And by the geometry of the column space, Danzig presented and evolved his method to solve the linear programming problems. And geometrically, the simplex method says the following. As you all know, if I have a set of linear inequalities, every linear inequality, let's suppose I have an inequality 2x1 plus 3x2 less than equals to 5. This linear inequality obviously corresponds to a line in the x1 x2 plane, right? And boundary is the line, this x1 x2, and well, it is not x2, it is x1 axis, sorry. And we know that if this is my line 2x1 plus 3x2 less than equals to 5, then we know that this this side of the line is your inequality 2x1 plus 3x2 less than equals to 5. Fine. Now if I have a set of inequalities, set of linear inequalities, then we'll have the inequality regions. So let me suppose I have these inequalities, that this is my first inequality, this is my second inequality, and this gives me this region, and this is my third inequality, and this gives me this region. Fourth inequality is over here, and this, and fifth inequality is this much. Fine. So accumulately, in simplex method, in a linear programming problem, I have the constraint set the following, that this is my constraint set. Constraint set is a polyhedral set. It looks like a polyhedron, that I have these as my constraint set. This as my constraint set, right? Any point inside this polyhedron is my feasible region, is my constraint set of the problem, that minimization of C transpose X. C is the vector consisting C1, C2 till Cn, subject to, this is the the matrix presentation of the linear programming problem. And here we know that this is my constraint set, and the simplex method, what it does is the following. It starts with a vertex, and after starting with a vertex, so let's suppose the simplex method has started from this vertex, and from this vertex it searches to the adjacent vertices. So it will move to either this vertex or this vertex, and it will move to that particular vertex which will give the maximum most improvement of the function. Here maximum most improvement is related to minimization, so maximum most decrement of the function value, because here improvement means decrement of the function value, because you are minimizing it. So the function value over here at let's suppose this is my function value f1 at this point, then it will search for the adjacent points f2 and f3. And at this adjacent point, the objective function value is f2, and here the objective function value is f3. Now the simplex method moves to either f2 or f3 depending on whether f2 is, if f2 is smaller than f3, then it will move to f2. If f3 is smaller than f2, then the simplex method will move towards f3. And if f1 is smaller than both f2 and f3, that means from f2 there is no improvement possible, then f1 must be the optimum solution of the problem. So the simplex method starts with a vertex, then it moves to the adjacent vertex which gives the maximum most improvement of the function. Then again at f3, once it has reaches, then at f3 it has two adjacent vertices, either f1 or this f4. So it will move to either f1 or f4 depending on which one is minimum. And let's suppose it is f4, because f1 is already visited and f3 is bigger than f3 is smaller than f1. So obviously a simplex method will not move back to f1 again. then F4 and so on, and it will reach to F5, and let's suppose at F5 the maximum post value is attained. So here what it is doing is that that Mochkin has found that it has moved from one triangle to the another triangle. We note that the first iteration has moved from, first iteration was in this triangle, first two iterations, then second two iteration was in this triangle. Fine. So the simplex method moves the vertices of one triangle to the adjacent triangles. Triangles in R2 plane are known as simplex. Triangles on R2 planes are known as simplexes. Fine. And in particular, any polyhedron region having exactly n plus 1 vertices in the Rn space. So you consider a polyhedral region in the Rn space, and if the polyhedron has precisely n plus 1 many vertex, then we refer it as a simplex. And therefore, in R2 plane, any polyhedron region having 2 plus 1, 3 vertices, obviously is a triangle. So from one triangle to another triangle, the simplex method moves if the problem is two-dimensional. That means if your x2 is x is belonging to the R2 plane, x is having two variables, two components, two-dimensional, and that's why Mochkin has named the method by Dantzig as the simplex method. Fine. So these are the few words about your operations research, optimization, calculus and geometry, nonlinear programming, linear programming, mathematical programming. Now let me refer you a few, let me now get into how the optimization theory have been evolved. You know, optimization theory development, although rapidly started after the development of the simplex method by George Dantzig. And after George Dantzig's work, several mathematics guys, they started working on optimization theory. And because Dantzig's work was the first work in a structured mathematical way, and then people took interest on developing the theory on optimization. And therefore, after the Second World War, the entire theory, you know, very surprisingly, most of the optimization techniques have been developed during 1947 to 1990 or so. By these 40 years, most of the work in optimization theory have been completed. And afterwards, till today, many optimization theories are coming. I will give a flavor of modern optimization also later on if time permits. But here, let me speak a few words about the ancient development on optimization theory. You know that the necessary optimality condition that usually we follow to solve an optimization problem that we have learned in our high school level. In high school level, it was taught to us that if I have a problem of one variable fx, here x is one variable, just let's suppose one dimensional variable. So here x is belonging to R. Then in the high school level, if we go back, then we have learned the following, that to solve this problem where the expression of the function fx is given, it is asked that find a minimum of this function fx. Then what we do usually, we deliberately start with finding solution of f dash x is equal to 0, right? And then find the solution of this equation, and let me suppose the solutions are the following finitely many, that x1, x2, let's suppose I have xt or xk, k many I have the solutions. Fine. Then next, after finding the roots of f dash x equals to 0, then what we do, we check the second derivative, right? fxi. Let's suppose I am checking for the ith point here and f dash xi. If it is greater than 0, then we call it is a local minimum. If it is less than 0, then we can ensure the point xi is a local maximum. And if it is equal to 0, then what to do? You all know what to do. If equal to 0, then next we go for the higher order derivative. And in the higher order derivative, if the first non-zero higher order derivative is of order, if is of odd order, that means let's suppose I have your at xi, I have f dash xi is equal to 0 and f double dash xi is also equal to 0, and then if the third derivative I compute f xi, let's suppose I have this is also 0 and I have till let's suppose if pth order at xi I am getting it equals to 0, and the first order is p plus 1 at which I am getting a non-zero value. And once this if the p plus 1 derivative at xi is non-zero, obviously it will be either greater than 0 or less than 0, right? Now here at first we have to find what is this integer p plus 1. If it is an even integer, then okay, you will have a local minimum or local maximum. But if it is an odd number, then this will imply that the point xi is a point of inflection. That means it does not have the point xi is not a local minimum and nor a local maximum, and that is referred as point of inflection or a saddle point also we refer. And there is also a very nice story behind the terminology saddle point. If time permits, I will speak. And if this first or the first value of the integer p plus 1, if that is even, for which the derivative value is non-zero, if it is even, then only there is a possibility of having local minimum or local maximum. If it is greater than 0, then it gives a local minimum, and if it is less than 0, it gives a local maximum. This is what the higher order derivative test says. Now let me just retain off only with the second derivative test, and accordingly you can generalize for the higher order derivative. Now usually what we do deliberately, what we have done eventually in the high school level is the following, that to find a minimum for this function fx, you solve this equation f dash x equals to 0 and then find the roots, and at those roots you check the higher derivatives, and if those are greater than 0, then you if f double dash x I greater than 0, then local minimum, less than 0 we will say local maximum, and equal to 0 says that you go for the higher order derivative. Fine, this is what the conclusion is. Now I have a question here, that does this method eventually applicable for every problem? My question is the following: is the above procedure applicable for, let me be little more restrictive, and I take a constraint here. Constraint set I have denoted by C, so let me denote it by C of fx, and let me be let me say that the variable x is n-dimensional, so that the discussion would go with general. The question is general, that is the above procedure applicable for finding minimum of a function of n variables, and also you are asked to find the minimum value inside the constraint set capital C. And as you all know, if here x is Rn, for Rn the problem in the n-dimensional space, my problem is the following. The procedure is the following. If you all recall, then you will find in the calculus course we all have learned this fact, in the mathematics 1 engineering mathematics course, we have learned the following, that if I have a problem, minimum, I am asked to find minimum of fx where x is n-dimensional, then what we usually do is the following, that instead of the derivative you take the gradient of the function, grad of fx is equal to 0, and you solve this system of equations because gradient has n many components, and therefore grad fx equals to 0 obviously is having n many equations inside of it. So this is called as a system of equations, and from here you find the set of points. Let's suppose x1, x2, xp are the set of points at which the gradient vanishes, and then after finding the points x1, x2, xp, you check the Hessian matrix of the function f at, let's suppose, the ith point. The Hessian matrix is nothing but the collection of the second order derivative, that del 2f, del here the ith variable xi, and del xj. Fine. It consists of all the second order derivative that you all know. Hessian is also denoted by the Nabla square f. These are usual notations for Hessian matrix. If the Hessian matrix is positive definite, then you have a local minimum. If it is negative, if it is indefinite in nature, then it is a saddle point. If it is negative definite, then it is a local minimum. That you all know. This is the procedure. Now my question is the following, that we do follow this procedure, but is this procedure applicable for any general problem? And the answer for this can be found from the following examples. Let me give you a few examples and you will get your answer for this question. Instead of just giving the answer, let me give you a few examples for which you will find that the above procedure is not valid. And eventually we cannot just say not valid. With a little careful application of the above technique can solve any optimization problem of this kind, where you have this function fx, a differentiable function, and x is belonging to a constraint set. Now let me pick up a few examples. Let me ask you to solve this problem, minimum of the function under root x, where x is lying in between 0 and 1. Fine. Now for this problem, if I apply the above method, what we do, this is my function fx, and obviously we deliberately will take the derivative of the function 1 by 2 under root x, and we'll equate to 0, and you don't have any point. You don't have any point for which the derivative value equals to 0 for the function, and therefore the above method cannot be applicable over here, right? So the above methodology, that you have the function fx and then you take the derivative and afterward you solve it and then go for the second order derivative check, that is not applicable for this problem. Fine. And let me take here, you might think the following, the function fx is not differentiable in the restricted set, that in this in the set C the function f is not differentiable, because at the point 0 the function f is not differentiable, and that's why this method is not applicable. Okay, I agree with you, but then let me take the following problem in which the function f is differentiable. Minimum of the identity function x, where I am asked to find minimum over this interval x belonging to 0 to 1. Now for this problem we note that the function fx is differentiable. Now if I apply differentiable in the entire C, in the entire constant set C. Earlier you might have thought that this function is not differentiable in the entire C and therefore the problem arose. But this is not really the fact. For this problem we note that the function x is differentiable everywhere and therefore x is differentiable at the set C. And if I apply now deliberately the above procedure, that you take f dash x equals to 0 and find the set of points at which f dash x equals to 0. Here you note that if I take f dash x equals to 0, then you don't have any point at which f dash x equals to 0, because that will lead to be 1 equals to 0, because f dash x is equal to 1, and therefore in this in this problem also, even if the function x is differentiable, but the procedure that f dash x equals to 0 and then you find x values and then go for the second order derivative check is not applicable. And let me take further more problem. Let me consider this problem. Minimum of this function e to the power minus x, and let me take x unrestricted from minus infinity to infinity, or let me take restricted 0 to infinity, let's suppose. For this problem we note that the function f is differentiable, and where is the minimum value? Here we note that the function minimum, this problem has a solution. It is not that the problem does not have a solution. Here also this problem has a solution, because here you note that if I just graph out, you will get a quick solution for this. For under root of x, the graph that you all know for 0 to 1 is this graph. This is 0 to 1, 0 to 1 x, y. And here obviously 0 is the minimum point. So here the solution and the solution global minimizer is x equals to 0. Fine. And here is also the solution is x bar is equal to 0, right? At 0 it has the minimum most value. So both the problems are having solutions. However, for this problem, although again you will fail that f dash x equals to 0 is not possible for e to the power minus x, because e to the power minus x is derivative value cannot be 0 anywhere, and therefore again the same procedure is not applicable. But not only that, this problem does not have a solution, because you know that here x-axis is asymptotic. X-axis is asymptotic. If I am from 0, then the left hand side will not be there. So let me just include, as I have drawn here, e to the power minus x. Anyway, you discard please the left hand side of 0, because I am just considering from 0 to infinity. You could equally also consider from minus infinity to plus infinity, that doesn't matter. So here x to y, but here we note that this problem does not have a solution. So here, although even if we know that the procedure that is not applicable, the procedure that we have learned in the high school level or in the advanced calculus, that is not applicable for every problem, even if we know, then also what will happen? Obviously then you will apply some methodologies to find minimizer of the constraint functions of the minimizers of the problems. But before getting into applying any method to solve your problem, obviously you have to ensure that your problem is having a solution. For instance, if take this problem, e to the minus x, it does not have a solution, because 0 is seemingly minimum for this function e to the power minus x, but 0 is never attained by this function. There does not exist any x in between 0 to infinity such that e to the power minus x is equal to the seemingly minimum 0. Here obviously you might think 0 is the minimum most value, but 0 is never attained by the function, and therefore 0 is not minimum value. Such a value is called infimum value. Anyway, so is the above procedure applicable? So the answer you all have gotten now, that obviously the above procedure is not applicable. Then where is the anomaly going on? You might feel all our learning in high school level or in the mathematics 1 course, engineering mathematics course, all are in vain. They are not useful. It is not really the fact. You know, mathematical theories are naive. Engineering students, they usually do not bother about the assumptions of the theorem. Before applying or before mentioning these theorems, these results, this procedure to solve an unconstrained optimization problem, a theory was presented to you, and that theory eventually is developed by Fermat in 1639, and this was Fermat. Fermat has developed the following result, that if I am to solve this problem, minimum over x belonging to C, fx. Fermat took this problem that minimum he has to find for the function f where X is constrained to lie in the constraint set C, and C is a subset of the non-empty subset of the n-dimensional Euclidean space. Then his necessary condition says the following: if X bar is a local minimum, if X bar is a local minimum, obviously then we cannot just say the gradient of f x bar is equal to 0, because we have seen a problem here that for this problem we have x bar is equal to 0, is a local minimum, but at x bar the derivative value is not 0, and therefore obviously here you note that if x bar is a local minimum, then obviously grad f x bar is not 0, but the result of Fermat says the following: if x bar is a local minimum and x bar is an interior point, that means it is strictly inside the set C. If x bar is an interior point of C, then you will have grad f is equals to 0. This is the Fermat's result, and you will be surprised to know all the mathematical optimization techniques, those are developed till today, they mostly attempt to solve this equation grad f x bar equals to 0 in an efficient way. All the techniques that you all know, the steepest descent method is the slowest known method, slowest, most popular to the engineers because of the fact that there is no deeper mathematics inside of the Cauchy's method or the steepest descent method, and that's why engineers, they usually fail to apply the steepest descent method. But steepest descent method is having rate of convergence 1, which is the minimum rate of convergence of all the methods in optimization those have been developed today. And Newton's method is the fastest known method. Sorry, Newton, I have misspelled here. Newton's method is having rate of convergence 2, and it is the fastest known method, but Newton method has several assumptions, and under those assumptions only the method can be applicable, and not all problem can fit into the assumptions of the Newton's theorem, and therefore Newton's method is not applicable for every problem. But if it is applicable, then it is the fastest known method for optimization. It has order 2, rate of convergence of order 2. Steepest descent has 1, and most of the theories though on or optimization techniques, those are evolved today, those are Cauchy-Newton's method, those we call Cauchy-Newton's methods are having rate of convergence in between 1 and 2. Popular known Cauchy-Newton methods are Davidson, Fletcher and Powell's method, or Broyden family, or BFGS method. Broyden, Fletcher, Goldfarb and Sanu, BFGS method, and several combinations of them, DFP and BFGS methods, are known as Broyden family method. Those are evolved. Those are known as Cauchy-Newton method, and Cauchy-Newton methods are having rate of convergence in between 1 and 2. Anyway, so here we note that the Fermat's result says that your point x bar has to be an interior point of the constraint set. Otherwise, this method that we have learned in the high school level is not applicable. In the high school level, what happens? Usually there is no constraint given to us, that we usually just take x belonging to R or x belonging to Rn, and therefore any point you take up is an interior point of your constraint set, and therefore in our high school level whatsoever we have learned, those are true for unconstrained problem. But here the question that I have asked to you is for a constraint problem, right? And for constraint problem, in order to apply the Fermat's rule, your point x bar has to be an interior point. Here you note that this x bar equals to 0 is a local minimum, but this 0 is not an interior point because it is a boundary point here. Your location of 0 is over here, which is a boundary point. And at boundary point, if local minima is arises, then obviously the derivative value might not be equals to 0. That is what we are observing here for this problem. Similar is the case for this problem as well. Anyway, so next let me tell you an interesting fact also here. You note that Fermat's theorem was developed in 1639. And in 1639, did we have any calculus? We did not have calculus. We did not have the concept of limit. We did not have concept of continuity, differentiability in 1639. But how Fermat has developed then? Obviously, Fermat's article did not use any concept of calculus. And if anyone is interested to learn what Fermat derived, I would like to refer a very classical book by Tikhomirov. Title of this book is Stories About Maxima and Minima. It is published by American Mathematical Society in 1991, I guess. You please check this title. You will get this book, and it is freely available over the internet. And this Tikhomirov book includes a brief excursion of the article by Fermat. And this Fermat's paper is not available in the internet. I have searched a lot. This is not available. I have also checked with several optimizers across the globe for the Fermat's paper. I did not get, but a glimpse of the paper is given in the book by Tikhomirov, Stories About Maxima and Minima. And there Fermat did not use the rule of calculus. And how he can use the calculus rule? Because calculus was evolved by Newton and Lagrange. Newton and Lagrange was coming later on. Newton and Leibniz. Separately, they have developed both Newton and Leibniz, and both the persons are tributed for the development of the calculus, and it was developed in during your 70-90 or so. During this time, the calculus was developed, like almost 130 years after, 150 years after the work of Fermat, and therefore Fermat did not use the rule of calculus. But the result of Fermat in today's terminology is this one, that if x bar is a local minimum and x bar is an interior point, then the gradient must be vanishing. And therefore, in ancient ages, in the development of mathematics, optimization theory is always there. And the oldest known problem in optimization theory is the DDoS problem, and it was solved even in 300 BC. It was known as the DDoS problem. DDoS problem is the following. Dido was a prince and prince of Tunisia. He was a Phoenician queen, and after defeated by his brother, she was just moving around with her soldier, and then in the city of Carthage, she took a shelter. City of Carthage. She took a shelter, and there was the lord of that land, Carthage, which is now named as Carthage. Later on, it was named, and the lord man of Carthage, landlord, was Arv, and Dido took up a deal with Arv. And the deal was fixed the following. Dido requested for a little much of land to give the shelter of her soldiers. Then Arv accepted with some conditions, and then Arv said the following: you can take that much of land, as much as you can cover by bull's hide. That means you take the skin of a cow or a bull, and you take the entire skin of the bull and you piece the entire skin of the bull or bull's hide. Entire skin you cut into pieces and you tie them up, and obviously it will be a long string, and by that long string you cover as much land as you can in the land of Arv. And obviously in today's terminology it says that you try to find a closed curve whose perimeter is equal to length of this string. And during that time in 300 BC, no mathematical tools was there. Only countings are little possible. And during that time, Dido with her soldiers could solve this problem. Very interesting. There was no function, there was no mathematical function theory, there was no calculus. There was only little countings with small pebbles known to the soldiers, but they have solved this problem, that they have found that the maximum possible area that can be covered by a closed curve whose perimeter is the length of a bull's hide is eventually the area of a circle. So they found the area that can be given by Arv is a circular region. And if you just Google today, and this area was later named as Carthage. Carthage is a city today, very nice city in Tunisia. And you just Google and you will find that the city Carthage is circular in nature, and not exactly circular, but little bit circular. And this Carthage city was named by Dido, and later on it was the area found to be circular, and this is again worked by Dido. And Dido's problem is the oldest known problem in optimization theory. And it is very interesting to learn that optimization theory is, although the modern optimization theory started after the work of Dantzig after 1947 or so, and during 1947 to 1990, most of the ancient method on optimization theory, those are in the textbooks or in reference books on optimization. Those are developed during 1947 to 1990. But optimization theory, although very little was developed before 1947, and very little, why very little? Because optimization theory is always related to solving a set of inequalities, because inequalities are the restrictions, constraints of an optimization problem. And as I said, by the thesis of Mochkin, Mochkin's thesis was related to identifying feasibility or a solution for a set of linear inequalities. And Mochkin's thesis includes only 36 papers. And therefore, Mochkin could only, with a very hard work, could find only 36 papers which are related to optimization. Fine, and that much little work was done before 1936. It was 1939. The thesis of Mochkin was developed in 1939, and it includes 36 articles. Anyway, then, but I must mention here that optimization theory not only started in 300 BC, but also the Lagrange's multiplier rule was also developed before 1947. The Lagrange's multiplier rule that we all have learned, Lagrange's multiplier rule. Lagrange's multiplier rule we all know from our calculus course. I'll refer to this Lagrange's multiplier rule very soon. Let's go to it. But before that, let me speak a few words about the ancient development on optimization. Lagrange's multiplier rule, you all know that it is a method to solve a minimization problem subject to equality constraints. That if you have, let's suppose, m many equalities, gix is equals to 0, then you all deliberately do the following, that you take the variable x and Lagrange's multiplier lambda, and you construct the Lagrangian function fx plus lambda 1 g1x plus lambda 2 g2x till plus lambda till you have lambda m gmx, right? And then what you do is you take the derivative of it and then you solve. You all know the process. I'll come back to this process, but let me finish a few words about the ancient development in optimization theory. It is not only the DDoS problem, but also time to time several geometrical problems of maxima and minima were posed and solved without the help of calculus. Let me mention another ancient problem in optimization, and it was cited in the Euclid's Elements. Euclid's Elements. Euclid is the person who is known for the Cartesian geometry, Cartesian coordinates, and for analytical geometry, today's that we have learned in the high school level, two-dimensional or three-dimensional analytic geometry, that is due to Euclidean. And Euclid's first work was Euclid's Element, where all the postulates for the coordinate geometry was given. And most interesting is that Euclid's Element is the first scientific monograph and textbook. First scientific monograph and textbook of mankind is the Euclid's Element, and it was written in 400 BC and 400 BC, and you note that there was also a maximum problem, but this maximum problem usually is not thought of under the maximum problem, because DDoS problem usually I do not know why. DDoS problem usually cited as the most ancient problem, but Euclid's Element was little before than the DDoS problem. But DDoS problem is still referred as in today's modern book. DDoS problem is referred as the most ancient one. But in Euclid's Element there was one optimization problem. It was the following, although it is geometrical problem, and that's why maybe people did not have thought it is an optimization problem. Let me tell you what was the problem. Problem was very interesting, that but simple rather, that a triangle was given and you find a parallelogram that is inscribed in this triangle ABC, inscribed in such a way that the parallelogram has one side parallel to AB, that means DE is parallel to AB, and another side EF is parallel to AC. So it is given that you find a parallelogram of maximum area, a parallelogram AFED. You find a parallelogram of maximum area such that DE is parallel to the side AB and EF is parallel to AC. This is the restriction given, and as this restriction cannot be thought of, they cannot be posed into linear inequalities or non-linear inequalities. That's why usually this is not referred as a problem in mathematical programming, and that's why this problem is usually not referred as the ancient problem might be. Now here obviously the solution you all know from your high school geometry. What is the solution for it? Obviously the solution here, this point E and F must be the midpoint, that you all know. But this is again a maximum problem, right? Maximization problem. You can think of it as an optimization problem, and it is even given in the Euclid's Element, the first book or monograph of mankind. Not only that, the first journal of mankind, research journal, Acta Eruditorum, Acta Eruditorum is the first journal, research journal of mankind, and this journal started in 1696. Before that, there was no journal, and in this journal also a nice problem. A problem was there, and even in the first volume, in the June 1696, this journal began publication, first journal of mankind, and there was a problem, and it was posed by a Swiss scholar, John Bernoulli, and he interestingly given the problem under the title "A New Problem That Mathematicians Are Invited to Solve." His title was "A New Problem, a new problem that mathematicians are invited to solve." And in this article, you will find a problem, and that is again of an optimization problem. And this optimization problem you all know, that is known as Brachistochrone problem. Brachistochrone problem is the following: that let's suppose I fall a particle under the gravity. This is my horizontal plane, and this is the direction of the gravitational force, and I have a particle, and this particle has to reach at a point B. So it has started from A to B, and under the gravitational force, this particle has been fallen and it will reach to the point B. Now there can be several curves that can be followed by this particle to reach at the point B. Now here, these are the curve that can be followed by the particle, and obviously the straight line path is also possible, A to B, to be followed to reach at B. Now here the problem was find that particular curve joining A and B such that the particle that is fallen from the point A under the gravitational force will reach at the point B at the minimum most time. Obviously it is not a circle, and this solution is given by a cycloid. And a cycloid will be followed, and that will take the minimum most time, because here gravitational force is there. Had there not been any gravitational force, obviously the straight line path would be the minimum time taking path. However, here it will be a cycloid, and this is the Brachistochrone problem. You all know Brachistochrone problem. And this Brachistochrone actually is having a Greek origin. It has the meaning, Brachistochrone has the meaning that shortest time. In English terminology, it is the shortest time. And that's why it is named as Brachistochrone problem. And this Brachistochrone problem is posed by Bernoulli in 1696. And therefore, in 1696 also we note that even in the first journal of mankind, there is an optimization problem. In the first book of mankind, Euclid's Element, there is an optimization problem. And therefore, we note that it is not 1947 where the optimization theory started developed. But before that, even at the starting of the theory of mathematics, or even the theory of geometry, optimization theory was there. Anyway, now if some diligent scholar is interested, they please refer to this book by Tikhomirov, V.M. Tikhomirov, to learn about several ancient history on the development of optimization. And this book actually is a lucid reading. This book is so lucidly written so that people do not need any mathematical understanding. This is just with simple terminologies of high school level. Tikhomirov has described all the developments, and very interestingly he has developed, and all the developments are described by Tikhomirov in terms of simple geometry, and therefore it is very easy to learn and very easy to pick up by any interested scholar. Now these are all few things about the development of optimization. Now let me get into a few mathematical topics. Anyway, if any of you are having query, and Yadavji, how much time do I have more?
Sir, already we are running short of time, sir.
Already we are running short of time. Oh my God!
Yes,
oh,
sir.
it is 2 o'clock.
Yes,
Okay,
sir.
then let me conclude in 5 minutes. No problem.
Okay, sir. Okay.
Let me conclude in 5 minutes, and then if any query is there, then I will be happy to answer.
Sure, sir.
Okay, so here let me just give you a glimpse about what are the modern development in optimization theory. Modern development, as I said, that from 1947 to 1990, most of the optimization theories have been developed. Although today optimization theories are still developing for the following fact. There is a book by Stephen Boyd, who is a great professor and called as father of the convex analysis or convex optimization. Stephen Boyd, he has a book with his co-author Vandenberg. He has written a very big Bible that is named as convex optimization, and this is freely available in this, and this is very extensive book. And if somebody wanted to learn convex optimization, then this book is really suggested. And in this book, not only this book poses some problem, but also the solution of this book is entirely available. So if somebody is interested, they can get the solution of it and they can just apply. And many interesting problems, those are coming from the real field, are given in this book. And this is really suggested to any engineer who would like to apply convex optimization theory. So the book by Stephen Boyd, Convex Optimization, his video lecture is also available in the internet. So if you really inclined on applying convex optimization theory, you please visit. You just search in YouTube convex optimization. You will get 2 series of lectures. Those are Professor Joydeep Datta from IIT Kanpur, and NPTEL lectures as they are there. But here this video lecture by Professor Datta is needing little bit of mathematical background. Otherwise, the description is not easy for the persons who are not very deeply involved with mathematics. Anyway, but people, if you want to really learn optimization theory, convex optimization theory, you please visit the Joydeep Datta's NPTEL lecture as well. And Stephen Boyd sir also is having in video lecture, and from the Stanford University. His video lecture slides, solution manual of the entire book, everything is readily available. So you can all learn from his book. Just one unique book that you can pick up, which is an easy pick. And but we know that in till 1972, the simplex method to solve linear programming problem was unbeatable. No method could beat the simplex method. In 1972, Klee and Menti, 2 friends, they have shown that the worst case time complexity of the simplex method is exponentially high. It is order of 2 to the power n. And Klee and Menti's work led to a question to the optimizer that can we be able to identify a polynomial time method to solve a linear programming problem. And it was, we should be all proud, it was by an Indian, Narendra Kormorkar, who is an IIT Mumbai alumni, who has developed a method in 1984, which is polynomial time for linear programming problem, and it is the interior point method. Interior point method is a modern method, although it is developed in 1984 for only to solve linear programming problem. Later on, this interior point method has been evolved to solve efficiently any convex optimization problem. And in the book of convex optimization, Stephen Boyd mentioned once that the theory of convex optimization today is this much, that convex optimization techniques are going to be almost reliable technology. What are reliable technology? Like in calculator, if I just try to multiply a big number with another big number, I just put the numbers and then I press the button, press the three buttons that you just consider the numbers times another number, then equal to, and you reliably get the solution of it. That you don't need to think what is the algorithm behind this large number is quickly multiplied to the large number. Obviously, there is some algorithm hidden into the calculator. Similarly, in the optimization toolbox, any convex optimization you give, optimization toolbox are optimization toolbox of MATLAB, AMPL is a software, MATLAB or games. These are the softwares that are usually applied to solve large scale optimization problem. And in all of these computational platforms, methods of convex optimizations are hidden, and therefore you just plug your convex objective function, convex inequalities, the constraints into the software platforms, and you can reliably get a solution for it. And that is done usually by the option of interior point method. And interior point method for even non-convex problem is also has also came in last year in 2018, that by the Vandenberg, who is the co-author of this convex optimization book of Stephen Boyd. He has developed the interior point method for even nonlinear programming problem, for non-convex problem. But for convex optimization problem, interior point method is a polynomial time method. And in convex optimization problem, usually what is the process that is followed in any descent method is the following, that it starts with an initial guess x0. Then it finds a descent direction along which the function can be decreased. So let's suppose this is my d0 direction. Then it takes a step length, let's suppose alpha naught, and it reaches to the point x1. At x1 again it searches for another descent method d1, another descent direction d1 along which the function objective function can be decreased. And let me take, let's suppose this much amount of length has been taken along the direction d1, then it has reaches to the point x2 and so on. In this way it keeps on moving, and it stops until and unless it gets grad of fx is equal to 0. Fine. This is what the process, general process of descent algorithm for solving an optimization problem. But here usually what happens, these choices of the step length, this alpha k, alpha 1, alpha naught, alpha 1, then here alpha 2, the choices are very crucial to make the algorithm very faster. And for the choices of this step length, several modern methods have been evolved. Those are inexact line search method. Inexact line search method, and popular methods are the Goldstein method, then Armijo backtracking method, or the Wolf's method. Wolf's method recently in 2014 from one China guy, Lee, he has also developed an inexact line search method. And these step length inexact line search methods are step length choices. These alpha i's, if they are not tactfully chosen, the method can be terribly slow. And that is what happened in the steepest descent method. Steepest descent method moves in the following manner, that it always takes the descent direction as the negative of the gradient. And this is also a very simple method. Even if you take any step length, let's suppose alpha k, this method has order of convergence is equal to 1. And usually what happens in steepest descent method, deliberately we take this alpha k to be just 1 or just a constant step or just a variable step 1 by k. But for all of these deliberate choices, you have the order of convergence of the steepest descent method is equal to 1. But if we devise a method in which the inexact line search methods are being applied, obviously the method can be really faster. And in today, several works towards these are going on the optimization theory. And as optimization theory for convex optimization is little bit nowadays saturated, although many problems are there. But today, convex formulation of non-convex problems are really hot topics of research. And not only that, solving a polynomial problem, that means if I am asked to find a solution of a polynomial function, a very simple, although the problem is looking that a naught x to the power n, a1 x to the power n minus 1 plus till, let's suppose, ap, this is a polynomial. And you might feel this problem is very simple to solve, but this is not really the fact. If I am having a polynomial of degree 6, let's suppose, then obviously if I am saying this function fx is my objective function, then the derivative of the function obviously is a polynomial of, on the left hand side, it is a polynomial of degree 5, right? Polynomial of degree 5. If fx is a polynomial of degree 6, then polynomial of degree 5 is equal to 0. Now this problem is not an easy problem. That polynomial of degree 5, finding a root of a polynomial equation of degree 5, there is a theory in algebra, abstract algebra or modern algebra that we call, that there is no closed form solution of a polynomial equation of degree 5. And if this is so, then as you all know, a particular polynomial degree of 5 can be solved. For instance, x to the power 5 is equal to 1. This can be solved. A particular polynomial you take, those can be solved, but they cannot be solved in a closed form. By that, what do we mean? Let's suppose I have a quadratic equation, ax square plus bx plus c is equal to 0. Then I know by the Sridhar Acharya formula, x values can be given by the values of a, b and c. This is very simple. Under root of b square minus 4ac divided by 2a, that you all know. Fine. So here a quadratic equation can be solved by the closed form. Closed form, by that I mean you put deliberately any value a, b and c over here and you get what are the roots for it. For cubic equation, you have a Cardan method by which you can solve a cubic polynomial. For 4th degree polynomial, you also have a method called Ferrari's method, but you note that that is applicable only for 4th degree polynomial. For 5th degree polynomial, you don't have any closed form solution, and therefore 5th degree polynomial equation is not easy to solve. And obviously then if I have a polynomial problem, that minimization I have to find where x is belonging to the real number line and I have a polynomial, then it is a very difficult problem, and it is proven that it is an NP hard problem. That means there cannot be any method whose time complexity is bounded by polynomial of the number of these constants a1, a2 till ap. Fine. And as it is NP hard, several convex formulation of this problem is coming out nowadays, and a semi-definite programming formulation of a polynomial problem is coming out today, and semi-definite programming is under the umbrella of convex optimization. So these are the few things those are going on nowadays. And now let me stop. Obviously by 2 hours I cannot cover all the topics. I was thinking to cover the duality theory, but anyway, let me stop here. If any question is there, I would like to answer.
So thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Actually, in this faculty development program,
Yes,
we
sir.
have all the sessions related to controls, but there
Okay.
are two sessions. One session was on measurement systems, measurement and
Okay.
instrumentation,
Hmm.
and your session is on optimization. So I
Okay.
feel something it is like we have a softie, and that you are putting a flavor, chocolate and vanilla flavor.
Yes, yes, it is just a
Yes, sir.
flavor kind of thing. That
Yes.
obviously in the
So
hardcore you have all control theories. Yes.
yes. So control
Yes.
actually needs that optimization and this measurement and instrumentation.
I was
Unless and
thinking
until
to speak. I was thinking to speak a few control problems, but I was thinking, let me give a general flavor. And usually, what happens when I go for invited talks, engineer usually, as they are not involved with my terminologies, they usually get bored. So I felt it is a kind of storytelling, so that people will at least know the development, how the things are being developed.
no, I hope they have enjoyed. I can see the participants still there.
Okay,
So
thank you.
because this was scheduled up to 1:30, but now it is 2:15. So
Oh, I
I
see.
need your
I am very sorry.
no, not
Okay.
at all, sir. It gives
No, you have
a
very
great
tight
flavor to us.
schedule. Okay.
So, so thank you. Again, we have a session at 3:15, and that
Okay.
will be by Professor Nishal Verma, sir, and on the deep learning. So again, there is another kind of flavor to our ice cream. So it is something we are going to the intelligent control. So till now, we have covered almost the various flavors of the controls with one session as the measurement and instrumentation, and with your as the optimization, which is always being used as in the controlled research and everything. So many without optimization, one cannot think of a better solution. So people needs to do some kind of optimization. We are doing control. So thank you, sir. Thank you very much for your nice delivery. If any if the questions are there from the participants, so one or two questions we can take.
How many participants did you get this time? Almost 50, I guess, right?
Yes, sir. Actually, we have the live sessions through YouTube also. So many
Okay.
of the participants are watching through that only. So
Okay.
more than 100 are there watching this.
Okay, I see. Okay. So this was live telecasted through YouTube also.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Can you please, if you don't mind, can you please share the link with me also, so that
Yes.
I would watch
Okay.
in what way I should be efficient enough,
Yes,
so that my few more deliveries, those are coming, invited
yes.
talks, those can be policed little bit.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
We'll share with you, sir.
Thank you.
And to add to this, it was a very nice delivery. We have watched throughout, and I too work in the optimization, but I find it very useful, and it will be